a countdown as we were waiting. Welcome and thanks to those of you who have just joined us. We have about 3 more minutes before we'll get started tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to get started in 1 more minute. It is now 6 o'clock, so we are going to get started, but I do see a hand up. Councillor Tozo, if you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself, you're welcome to speak. Okay, I did see the hand go back down. Feel free to jump in if you still did want to speak, but otherwise I am going to get started. So first off, thank you again and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at the City of Kingston's engagement session for the proposed off-leash dog park at Snider Park. My name is Nancy Knight and I'm a communications officer from the City of Kingston, and I will be moderating tonight's session. Behind the scenes tonight, we also have Heather Brown, who will be acting as our technical producer. So before we move into our presentations, I do have a couple of housekeeping items to share. First, this session is live streamed to YouTube and recorded. So to protect your privacy, all participants have their video turned off and have been muted, and the chat functionality in Zoom is turned off. Next, we do know that sometimes technology troubles can happen. There is a list of common challenges on Get Involved Kingston, including what to do if your audio or video aren't working. Please note that you're also able to adjust your view options so that you can see both the presentation and the members of the project team at the same time. If for some reason your internet connection does go down, you can call into the meeting at the number you see on the screen here. Please write it down just in case. The number is 613-453-5818, and the webinar ID is 822-5350-6665. You can also follow live on YouTube, where this session is closed caption. We will do our best to help you with any technical problems that may arise, but sometimes the easiest way to resolve issues is to log out of Zoom and then rejoin the meeting. And you can do that using the link you received in your registration confirmation email that you used to join tonight. Today, we're also going to be providing a question and answer period following the presentation. So although you're welcome to use the Q&A feature at any point during the presentation, I am going to hold any questions until we reach that Q&A. The Q&A feature can be found at the bar across the bottom of the screen. So to ask a question, simply type into that question area. You're also welcome to raise your hand to speak and ask a question during the Q&A. So to do that, please use the raise hand function that can be found by following these steps. Click on the Q&A and a pop-up will appear. There will be multiple options. Choose raise hand. So I'm going to be monitoring for this, and I will acknowledge you and then ask you to turn on your microphone so you can ask a question or make a comment. And if you're calling in tonight and you would like to raise your hand, press *9. So on your screen now are our guidelines for participation. So if you've joined us before for an engagement session, they might look familiar to you. So these guidelines for participation were developed as part of the city's public engagement framework, and they're really to make sure that we can all join together and be respectful and open to ideas. So I'm going to leave these up on the screen for about 30 seconds so you have the opportunity to read them. If there are any concerns about these guidelines, please let me know by using the raise hand function. Okay, thank you. Seeing no objections to the guidelines for participation, we're going to proceed into the online engagement session following these guidelines. So I'm now going to pass the presentation over to Neil Unsworth, the Manager of Parks and Shoreline.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks a lot for the introduction. As Nancy said, my name is Neil Unsworth. I work in the Engineering Services Department at the City of Kingston. I'm the Manager of Parks and Shoreline. Today, we have a number of other people joining us on the panel. The people we will be showing are Amy Gibson, the Manager of Recreation Services, Shanda Sames, Parks and Open Space Coordinator, also in Engineering Services on my side, and Stephen Skivington, who is the resident who has brought forward this proposal to have the city develop an off-leash dog area in Snider Park. In addition to the people who I've just mentioned, we also have some technical support members from the communications department who are off screen. And I believe joining us today is also Councillor Tozo in the audience as one of the participants or attendees. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that shows the current number of off-leash dog areas that we have in the city in red circles. Starting in the west end of the city, we have Rotary Park. In the middle of the city, we have Meadowbrook Park. Down in closer to the downtown, we have the Memorial Center. In the east end of the city, at the third crossing, we have McLean Trails Park. And in the far east end of the city, we have a rural park called Grass Creek Park that also is a dog park. You can also see in a pink or fuchsia colored circle, you can see Bell Park. And Bell Park is approved by City Council to have a future dog park, and that dog park will likely be built in 2025, subject to budget approval. That park amenity was arrived at through an extensive public consultation plan on how to renovate Bell Park after the former golf course had ceased operations. And that occurred during the sort of 2016 to 2018 period. In the blue circle, in the center of the blue circle is Snider Park, the park we're speaking about this evening. And as most of you are likely aware, it's located on Guthrie Drive in the top of Rideau Heights. The circles represent a 2-kilometer distance from the park itself, which is approximately a 25 to 40-minute walk or a 2 to 5 minute drive, depending on the street composition. Next slide, please. So those original 5 existing city dog parks were established as part of an early initiative to sort of bring this service into our inventory of parks back in 2009. There was a number of community consultation efforts made at the time and a lot of research done and to determine sort of the best practices for what dog parks should be. And as part of that effort, the off-leash dog park policy was developed and approved by City Council. Now, the policy covers partly the governance of the existing dog parks, so the ones we already have. But it also has a section in the policy where community members can request a new off-leash dog area in a park near their home. So I'm just going to walk through the process that's associated with that exercise, because that's why we're here tonight. There's been a community member and a number of other community members have sort of joined in on that request and have formally asked city staff to consider an off-leash dog park in Snider Park. So the process that we have to go through, according to the policy that council approved a number of years ago, is number one, we receive the community request. Then secondly, staff will assess the site. And we'll talk about the site considerations a little bit later on this slide. But suffice it to say, we are past the point of assessing the site, and we are now into step 3, which is a public meeting. So we've made a decision that the site has potential to support an off-leash dog area. It's not, again, a city initiative. It's at this point a community-led request. but we are going to have a public meeting and take in feedback. So we'll be taking notes and taking in all that feedback. We've had already an open house located at the community center this morning, and there's been surveys filled out. There's online survey opportunity. And again, we have ability for residents to contact city staff directly through either phone or email. And at the end of the day, we'll take in all that information, sort of boil it down, and then we will have to make a report to City Council, and they will make a decision about this project. And if that decision is to go forward with the project, then after that point, then city staff would put in a request for a future capital budget. Capital means a construction, a one-time budget. And then we would, if that budget was approved, we would construct the off-leash dog area. One more thing to note is that as part of the process, all dog parks have the potential to be removed if they are unsuccessful. So if we have recurring complaints or conflict with community members in a dog park, the dog park can be removed. And it is much more challenging to remove a dog park or to be honest, to remove any service from public realm, because people have gotten used to it. So we want to do it right, and we want to make sure that it's the right choice and that it has the best chance of being successful. And that's sort of part of what this planning process is about. So the policy tells us these are not staff decisions. These are specific directions of council in the off-leash dog park policy, is that a site for an off-leash dog area must be a minimum of 1.5 acres in size, and it can be up to 4 acres. To give you an idea, 1.5 acres is about the size of 4 to 15 houses, house lots altogether. And there's a little diagram to the side that shows that. So it's quite a large space. And if you wonder why that is the case, there's a couple of main reasons for that. And these were all, determined through a lot of extensive research back in 2008 and 9, but the primary reason is for safety, and it makes the dog park safer for the animals and for the dog handlers or dog owners. If the dog park is too small, it can lead to conflict. The other issue is hygiene and maintenance. And again, if the dog parks, when they get smaller than that 1.5 acres, they quite quickly become difficult or impossible to maintain, and they have to be closed down, or they can also become unhygienic. So the other criteria that's required is that the off-leash dog area has to be fully fenced. They can't just put up a sign and say this is an off-leash dog area. We also are required under policy to provide parking, so that will be done through a parking lot and an on-street parking combination. And we have to keep the dog parks a minimum of 15 meters away from park amenities like playgrounds and sports fields and toboggan hills, so that there's no conflict between those two uses. The separation from neighboring residents to limit impacts of noise or odor is probably one of the most difficult parts of locating a dog park in a park, is to make sure you have enough distance. And you might ask the question, what is the right distance? And it varies from site to site. The topography of the land, the surrounding ambient noises, and just the nature of the dog park usage, which again is hard to forecast, all determine the right distance. But we know where they're too close, they are not successful, and they ultimately have to be removed. There was a dog park in Lake Ontario Park as part of one of the early trials that was removed for this reason specifically, because it was, again, too close to adjacent homes, and the noise and the odor was too overwhelming to the neighbors. The other thing that the policy requires us to do is limit the impact to the natural habitat, any environmentally sensitive areas, any park drainage. So we've assessed that, and again, are confident that this site sort of meets that test. And when we do select sites, and we have to prioritize that, the policy requires that we consider the distribution of the off-leash dog areas across the city. So if you refer to the previous slide, or you'll remember the previous slide, you can see, where they're spaced out around the city is something that we are obliged under policy to think about. The next slide, please. Okay, so that was a lot of information about what we sort of do behind the scenes. And so I'll try and loosen up a little bit and talk more specifically about Snider Park. So on the right-hand side, you will see an image of Snider Park, or at least a partial image of Snider Park. And I hope that people can see there's a green line around the park boundary, and there's a small sort of playground shaped sort of brown area where the play equipment is on the right-hand side of the park. And in this diagram, what city staff did was they just arbitrarily dropped a little square that was 1.5 acres in size, which is the minimum size, in an area of the park that could be 15 meters away from the playground, which is the policy requirement. And as you can see, the resulting distance from the neighbors to the west would have only been 25 meters, which we know is very, very close for an off-leash dog area. So we would not have recommended that. And on a subsequent slide where you're going to see the proposed off-leash dog area, you'll see that we found a better way to do the layout for the park that makes that distance much better. So again, when we evaluated this site, we looked at the required area, we looked at the separation from the homes, we looked at the separation from the play equipment. We thought about the off-leash area's noise and odor. We also thought about the ambient noise that comes off of the Highway 401 and considered if that would make the situation better or worse. And from residents in the community and from the sort of proponent of this project, we were convinced that there is merit to an off-leash dog area adjacent to the 401 highway, in that the 401 highway is noisy a lot of the time, as many of you know, and that sound may compete or screen out any or some of the sounds coming from the off-leash dog area. Now, that's not assured. There is a possibility that the sounds could compound each other, or that certain frequencies of sounds of barking dogs or yipping dogs might be heard above the lower rumble of the 401. But definitely, this is not a quiet park to start with. So I think we thought that had a lot of merit to it, and that helped us consider that the relatively close separation that we're going to be proposing to neighboring homes may be adequate. The last thing we consider on the site is access, and that means basically the pathway. We are obliged to make an accessible route for someone who has a disability, so that they can get to the off-leash area. And this site is a bit challenging because it's quite steep on the road frontage, on the street frontage. So we looked at that, and we think we can overcome that as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. So what you see in front of you on your slide, and hopefully this is visible, is the entire limit of Snider Park in the green line going all the way around the edge, with Guthrie Drive at the bottom of the page and the 401 at the top of the page. And once we determined that Snider Park sort of had merit as a potential site for an off-leash dog park, we sort of put pen to paper and try and come up with a reasonable design that might be suitable and acceptable by the neighbors, as well as sort of from our experience, knowing that this might give us the best chance of success for the off-leash dog area. So one of the things we did was we talked about, like I said, fencing is a requirement, but what would happen is that, in more detail, is that the city would do a double entry gate. So that means you get to take your dog through a small gate into a little, very small corral, and then you can take the leash off. And then from that point, you can go through a second gate into the off-leash dog area. And the off-leash dog area, again, in this diagram, is 1.5 acres in size. It would require some tree removal in order to install the fence, and the fence would go back to the property limit. There is some brush and tree in that location, and in order to get the fence in, there'd be some minor tree removal, but the plan would not be to remove sort of the whole area. There would be adequate open green, sort of open lawn area for dog play in this configuration without removing any significant amount of that brush. And in addition, with the fence layout in any area where we did require vegetation removal, we would be sure to dodge all those higher quality trees. There are a couple of really nice ones, especially well, on the right and left hand side of the proposed off-leash area. This project would require a parking lot to be constructed in the park. There is a lot of bedrock and a fairly steep hill at the front of the park, but the entrance would be likely to come off of approximately across from Joyce Street. And off-leash, this would become a park parking lot, not just for the off-leash area, so anyone could use it at any time. It would likely have more than 8 or 10 stalls, but maybe not much more than that. That's a typical amount of usership we see in a dog park at a time. But we would have to kind of study and optimize that parking based on the topography and the amount of rock breaking required. To fit a new flat spot, it would be paved in the park. If there was a sort of a very busy Saturday morning where it was just beautiful weather and lots of people decided to come to Snider Park to check out the dog park, overflow parking would be on the street. And we recognize that Guthrie Drive has a two-way bus travel on it, and we have checked with our transit and transportation departments and confirmed that while there are some areas where pedestrians stop and gather, where we would not want to encourage parking, all in all, parking is acceptable from a design perspective in some locations along Guthrie, likely in front of the park. So together there would be enough parking that the use of the dog park wouldn't cause any significant challenge. And we have quite a bit of experience with the other dog parks about how many cars go to these sites on a daily basis and on a peak period when the weather's really nice. And I think we are well equipped to do that design if this project goes forward. So the last item that is proposed as part of this park project is that the play equipment that's existing on site would be relocated, and it would need to be relocated because the sort of best area for the dog park is more or less where the play equipment currently is. That would essentially be the entrance area of the dog park. And of course, the playground can't be in the dog park. So the proposal is to move the playground equipment a little closer to the street and a little bit more towards the west. And there's a nice big tree and a bit of a flat area that can be seen sort of in the left third of the park. We think this will provide a nice safe place for the playground, lots of visibility from the street, more than enough separation from that bus traffic we talked about. And we would just have to extend the pathway to get to that location. And what's kind of nice about that configuration is that while most residents that use our off-leash dog areas comply with our bylaws and keep their dogs on a leash until they get into the park, it is inevitable that some people don't do that. And you can get a habit of some off-leash dog users, park users, just letting their dog out of their car and letting them sort of run without a lead until they get into the park. And that can be a problem if they're going by an open playground. But in this design, we have avoided that circumstance by essentially putting the playground farther along the same pathway. So, and we think that conflict will be, would not be a conflict. Nonetheless, leashing of dogs is required outside of the dog park area. What is a potential benefit or an efficiency to this proposal is that the play equipment in Snider Park is not new. In fact, it's getting a bit older and closer to the end of its lifespan. So we have a program where we look at the asset in the park, the play equipment asset, and we determine its sort of condition and age and the risk factor with keeping it intact. And then we have a big long list of over 100 playgrounds where we will renovate and remove and replace the equipment anyways. And people may be familiar with Marker's Acres Park, which is located at Conacher and Sutherland. And we just replaced the playground last year in that location. Now that play structure was older that we replaced, but it is likely that in the relatively near future, the play structure would be replaced anyways in Snider Park. So the cost to relocate the playground and put in a new one is something the city has to pay for anyways over time. I think the last item on this slide I wanted to bring people's attention to, in case they can't see the wording, was that the distance between the property limits and the off-leash dog area is 50 meters in this proposal. And again, people may ask, is 50 meters adequate? It is a very unique site. We don't get a lot of noise attenuation from vegetation or landform, but we do think that there's going to be potentially some sound competition from the 401 that may alleviate some of that sort of noise that comes out of a dog park. I will say that the noisiest parts of the dog park are usually the areas quite close to the entry gate, where people have a tendency to walk, a number of meters into the park, and then they let their dog off, and then that becomes a bit of a social area for the dog owners as well as the dogs. And they have a little play right at the entry area. So that's what we call a noise generation source. So that's actually really the more important number to factor. It's not to say that the dogs couldn't walk all the way around the perimeter of the dog park and bark their way around as they were closer to the perimeter fences, but the habit that we see in almost all of our dog parks is that the major noise generation area comes from the front entry, which would be, we would work on that detailed design, but I think it would be approximately near where the current playground is. Next slide, please. So we're getting to the end of the presentation, and then we can take some questions, but maybe just for some other information, our next steps are, like we said, we're going to take a bunch of notes. We've already been taking in notes and getting comments and feedback from an earlier open house session we had at Ritter Heights Community Center. We have an online survey. It's called Get Involved. That's the platform. And there's a survey. We hope you register and provide feedback about whether you're in support of this or you have any concerns. And any questions or comments that we can also reply. We can also take information directly as staff. Shanda Sames and I and Amy Gibson are all open. I think Shanda's contact information is probably on the sign in the park. But we can take information in verbally or by email. So after we get all of that information and any questions and comments from tonight, we will evaluate the community feedback. And I just wanted to comment that Community feedback on off-leash dog areas. When it leads to successful off-leash dog areas is when we get community consensus. So it's different than a vote or counting people who are for or are against a dog park area, because that's not proven to be a successful method for determining if everyone can live with a dog park in their community or in their park. So we really try and look for community, an indication of community consensus in our commentary, in the comments we receive. I think it's fair to suggest that some comments, that we get about proposals in parks, whether it's an off-leash dog area or a skate park or a basketball court, all sort of relatively noisy things. There can be unjustly negative feedback, and we know how to filter that. But if we get really bona fide feedback, even if it's from a relatively small segment of your neighborhood, we do listen to that, and and that can cause us to potentially not have good consensus. So every bit of sort of honest information that you can give us is really helpful. Then we will, under the policy, we will be going to the Arts and Recreations Community Policy Committee, which is a standing committee of City Council made up of city councilors, I think 5 or 6 city councilors typically, and they meet every other month to address issues in this subject vein. And our policy directs us to that particular committee, and staff will write a report. It will lay out everything we've learned about this proposal, and then we'll make a recommendation based on our guiding documents, such as the Parks and Rec plan, which is a guiding plan that council approved in 2021, and community feedback, of course, and any other initiatives that are occurring concurrently in this sort of similar subject vein. And then the Arts and Recreation Community Policy Committee makes a recommendation based on the city staff's report. Usually they say approved, we forward this on to city council, or they say, we want to change it and make amendments to it, or they will reject it. Whatever the final decision is of that committee, that goes to city council usually about 3 weeks later. And then if council approves that, and if the project were to go forward, what city staff would do, as I've mentioned before, is we would then put the capital project budget in a long-range plan. Now, the capital project means the actual construction dollars, and they are approximately $500,000 for this proposal that you've seen tonight. Could be a little more over time. It could be a little less if we get into the detailed design, but that's made up of approximately $300,000 to $350,000 for the off-leash dog area improvements, the pathway improvements, the fenced compound, and the parking lot makes up a fairly healthy portion of that. The playground replacement, which is a cost we are going to have to, the city has to bear anyways, is approximately $150,000 to $200,000 of that overall project budget. As far as when would this project happen, we have heard from interested community members to date that they would like to see the project occur in the next 2 to 5 years. I can't say at this point, because we're not through the process, what our recommendation to city council would be on the timing, but we recognize that that's what the community so far has told us they'd like to see. And then whenever that construction did occur, it would not close the whole park during construction, but just based on the layout and configuration, would close quite a bit of it. And that would typically take 1 season. Usually they would start in the spring and they'd be finished by the fall. And then it would be open for business. We have an operating cost that our maintenance department, which is called Public Works, will have to bear in order to take care of a dog park. So there is sort of an annual cost to keep it up and in good shape going forward. Next slide, please. That's a cute dog. All right, thanks a lot. And I'm hoping maybe Nancy, if my colleagues can join me and we can field some questions. I'll try and field most of them, but I may defer to Shanda, Stephen, or Amy as well.
All right, thanks, Neil. So just a couple things to go over again before we jump in. To join the conversation during the Q&A, please add your questions into that Q&A, and then I'm going to read them out loud for our team to answer. You are also welcome to raise your hand to ask a question. I will be watching for this, and I'll acknowledge you and let you know when it's time to unmute and ask your question. If you do raise your hand, I will ask that you ask one question at a time to make sure we have the opportunity to answer all of the questions tonight. And one other note is that if for some reason we don't get to all of your questions tonight, or you think about a question you have on another day, we are going to answer all of your questions on our Get Involved Kingston project page. And there will be an opportunity, as has been mentioned tonight, to complete that online survey before March 15th to share any additional comments or questions you might have. And that survey is also going to be posted on that project page. So we can go ahead and get started now. So please go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A or raise your hand. The link to the survey has been also added into the chat to make it a little easier for you to find that page to complete the survey.
Nancy, do we need an icebreaker?
Oh, I do see one question has come
Oh,
through.
all right. Let me know when you need an icebreaker.
So I see the question, the first question here is about the online option for feedback. The link only seems to offer options for phone or paper copy. I can actually take that one. The survey will be going live after this meeting today. So if you visit that Get Involved Kingston project page, you will have the option to submit that feedback online. The next question I see here is from Susan. The question is, are you considering including a small dog enclosure? There is a real need for this at all city dog parks. Go ahead, Neil.
I think the answer is yes, the city would consider a small dog enclosure, and it would, as we discussed with some members of the community earlier in the day, it would be inside that same 1.5 acres, but there should be enough room. And it's not really a question, but the resident had a statement that said they weren't sure why we didn't have these in other dog parks in the city. And I can probably answer that as well. So the small dog enclosure is a very common feature in dog parks that have been built in a modern way. Our policy did include that as an optional amenity when the policy was drafted, but at the time it wasn't a mandatory amenity. So at the time when the dog parks, the existing 5 dog parks in the city were constructed, it's over 12 years ago, it actually, even though it was something that we were aware of that might be a future need, it actually wasn't a popular trend, and a lot of older dog parks don't have off-leash areas dedicated for small and large dogs that are from that sort of vintage. So I guess that's sort of a long way of saying they didn't do it back then, and now it's a more common thing to do. So yes, thanks for the comment and the feedback. It's been noted a couple of times already, and we know that that is one way that a dog park can be can serve more residents and dogs, because we know there are certain residents and their dogs who won't use a dog park when there's a combination of animal sizes inside. Thanks.
Okay, the next question is from Sashel. They are concerned that removing the trees and vegetation that currently absorbs much of the 401 noise would allow the noise to easily travel to homes along Guthrie, Carly, Joyce, and Edson streets. Has this been considered? Neil, can you comment on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first comment is that we don't intend to remove vegetation as part of the project in any significant amount. If we can get a fence line, if the project were to go forward, we would make every effort to get a fence line to kind of sort of find its way through the existing vegetation without too much impact to that space. Now it's inevitable that dogs will create some desire lines and little walking paths, and that over time will reduce the vegetation a little bit. But very, very, very little change to the actual sort of, mass of vegetation that's in the park already. I should provide some
Think we might have lost Neil there for a second. Seems to be frozen.
comment. How about now?
Maybe. I think it cut out at the end there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, well, if I do cut out, Amy and Shanda, please feel free to field the rest of the questions. And I do want to just, before we finish this evening, give Stephen, who is on our panel, an opportunity to address the public meeting and tell us why he thinks a new dog park in Snider Park is a great idea. So I think we'll fit you in, Stephen, if I get cut off. But I just wanted to finish my feedback to the resident with regards to vegetation and noise attenuation. So vegetation is not known to attenuate noise significantly. So even though we're not planning on removing any significant vegetation, I just wanted to say that the vegetation itself on its own doesn't do a lot of that task anyways. Landform can do some of that, but we are also not proposing to change the landform. So I don't expect that this particular concern is something that we should worry about as part of this project if the dog park were to go forward.
Thanks, Neil. We'll just pause here for a moment and see if any other questions come in. So I do see another question here from Sashel. They have said, has consideration been given to relocate the playground further southwest because it's currently proposed to be located at the base of a hill that many children use for tobogganing? Neil, can you take that?
Yeah, absolutely. We thought we had it located on the plan at the top of that hill. That being said, thank you so much. We definitely would look at that in great detail. And maybe I should have mentioned that if this project goes forward and then a budget is set and then approved, we would do a detailed design and we would consult with the community about all the details of exactly what play equipment you would get, you would want to select, exactly how the dog park and the pathway configurations are built, the exact tree removal or retention. So all those details would come out in that detailed consultation. And that would usually occur, like 3 to 6 months before the actual construction would happen. But because the project is not a council approved project at this point, we did the best we could with the schematic. But yeah, great comment. We certainly will keep that in mind. Thank you. And I see a follow-up question there, Nancy, and I think you've been able to share your screen. If people can see that, the question was, do you mind, Nancy, if I summarize the question?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, it was, where is the playground proposed to be relocated to? So first of all, in the same park. So it's not being relocated out of the park. But the current location is more or less at the top of the hill. And you can see that in a sort of a pale pinky brown blob in the middle of the diagram. And then it's proposed to be located a little more to the west and a little bit south of the current one. And you can see that in a sort of dotted yellow circle. So not a big change in the location, just enough to get it far enough from the off-leash dog area if that were to go forward. Thanks.
All right, while we're pausing here for more questions to come through, perhaps this is a good time, Steve, for you to go ahead and share your thoughts about the presentation, or maybe why you brought this proposal forward.
Okay, everyone can hear me? Yeah, I moved here about 2 years ago, and with our couple of dogs out walking, encountered a lot of people with dogs in the neighborhood. And I believe they let me know that they had tried to do this twice before and failed over the years. We actually met somebody today who I think was involved in that. And when they found out what my background was as a lobbyist, they asked me if I would try. So this wasn't my idea. This was simply something I said I would approach with my political experience and try to see if I could do something. And we've been doing this for a year. Just so you know, this isn't a whim. We had our first meeting about a year ago. We had at least 4 or 5 meetings. I thank the staff for brilliant configuration here. This started like back of an envelope, and it's really quite excellent what they've come up with. I would simply put forward the proposition to Brandon, who's our counselor, who is on the line here. Looking for a way of horse trading. If it takes 5 to 8 years for us to get this, most of us, I think there's a lot of retired Army veterans here. Most of us will either be dead and our dogs will be dead. We'd love to see this happen in 2 years. We understand that there's a year of budget cycle and a year of construction, that it can't be done quicker than 2 years, and that's perfectly fine. The Bell Park has been approved for 2 years, and in addition, the pickleball court and some various changes and paths and freshening up the front of that. What I'm wondering is, could you, if this gets approved by the committee and approved by, brought forward by staff, could you talk to your fellow counselors and see if maybe we could have this thing open in 2 years and just push the Bell Park one back? The reason I suggest that is that I think you're going to see an awful lot of people in this neighborhood simply walk in here without driving. There may be people from other parts who do drive in here, but this is a really badly underutilized park, both I think from a kid's point of view and from a dog point of view. And I think the solution they've come up with actually would marry both things quite nicely, because we weren't looking to have a dog park and get rid of the kids stuff. It was obvious the kids stuff needed to be updated, and that was going to happen with or without a dog park. But if there's some way that we could sort of horse trade and get this one built in 2 years, and then the Bell Park one can be built whenever that 5, 8 years, that's fine. Because frankly, we're not going to get in our car in this neighborhood go to Bell Park. It won't be used by us. I'm just telling you, based upon my 2 years of doing 10 dog walks a day and talking to everybody. So that was really the genesis of the plan. That's what I'd like to see happen. I believe there'll be an opportunity for myself and others to talk to the committee in, I think it's April, when they have their meeting, and hopefully are looking at this proposal. And there may or may not be a chance to talk to council a couple of months after that. So the decision should be made within, I don't know if by summer or by fall, one way or the other. But this is just an almost perfect location. And, it's a happy bunch of coincidences. Without the 401 and its ambient noise, we probably wouldn't be looking at this. And without the trees that are kind of in there blocking, especially to the west, when those houses will be nicely blocked by that. I don't think the dogs are going to be louder than frankly the 401. So that's the genesis of it. That's what we're hoping to accomplish, and this will be a win if we can get it in 2 years instead of 5 or 8 years. So again, thanks to staff. They've been fantastic, and Brandon, I see you're still there. I hope you can maybe go talk to your fellow counselors, and perhaps we can make a deal. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve, for your comments. I do see that Councillor Tozo has raised their hand. Please go ahead and unmute.
Hey, and thank you everybody for, here, I'm just gonna turn on my video. Oh, I don't know if I can turn my video. So I'm just gonna thank you everybody for your feedback here. Just to sort of Steve's point is I always advocate for our community whenever there's a project there. So you don't have to ask me to do that, Steve. I'm always pleased to put as much pressure on my fellow councillors to get things done for the neighborhood. That I possibly can advocate for. I think what is going to be valuable in what other councillors will look for is just what Neil was talking about earlier with that community buy-in and community consensus. We don't want to put $500,000 into a capital project in an area and not have it be successful, because then that's not $500,000 we can put towards traffic calming, or we can put towards housing, or we can put towards other major initiatives that I know a lot of other councillors are interested in. So I would say it's great to get as much feedback as possible. I would just, Steve, you're really good at this. Just get as many do your community outreach, get as much feedback to staff as you can. That the devil will be in the details, and that staff recommendation will really be valuable for the appropriate committees and me on council to advocate. Okay.
Thank you very much. I will just pause for another moment here before we move on. And of course, if the panel has any other comments to add, please go ahead and jump in. I do see a question here from Sashel. If the play structure is to be relocated or reconstructed, has consideration been given to make it a splash pad? It might improve the use of the park along with the proposed dog park. Neil, can you take that one?
Yeah, of course. The splash pad for this community is located in Shannon Park. There are no other splash pads planned in this area of the city. The city's Parks and Recreation Plan that council approved in 2021 identified the future citywide, the splash pads that would be located in the city in the next 15 years would be located in the West End. One is called Cataraqui West Community Park, which is currently under design for construction. And another one is potentially at Jim Beattie Park, which is sort of near the airport. So no splash pad planned for this part of the city or in this park. Thanks.
Thanks, Neil. I'm not seeing any other open questions at this time, but again, I'd like to pause just in case you are typing, so bear with us here for another moment.
Can I jump in for one quick thing?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to let people know, people might say, why are we spending $500,000 on a dog park when we have a homeless, situation? And I just want you to let you know that in addition to doing this for free, I'm working with some very, very talented neighbors who are trying to come up with a solution again for free to the homeless crisis in Kingston. So it's not an either or. It's not a dog park or fix the homeless problem. We're working on both things simultaneously. And again, we got some phenomenal talent in here who's retired in the neighborhood, who including my neighbor who was a big part of the Wheel-Trans for disabled people in Toronto, part of the TTC. So I just want people to know that they can feel good about doing the dog park, understanding we're still trying to work on the homeless crisis as well. So it's not an either or.
Thanks, Steve. All right, I am going to move us into our wrap up then for tonight. So again, thank you everybody for participating. Before you sign off, I would like to ask you to complete an evaluation poll to let us know how we did tonight. that should have popped up on your screen. And while that poll is up, just a couple of reminders to cover before you go. The first is, again, that we are inviting you to visit the Get Involved Kingston page to add your comments to the online survey that will be available until March 15th. We have confirmed it is already live. So for some reason you have difficulty accessing that survey, please feel free to reach out to any of our project team members. The contact information is available on that same Get Involved project page. So you can send us an email to let us know and we'd be happy to help. The next is that input from this engagement session and the survey will be shared on that Get Involved project page as an engagement summary. So if you have signed up to receive updates about this project, you're going to be notified when it is live on the site. And if you haven't signed up to receive notifications but would like to, please reach out to Shanda and ask to be added to that project list or any of the other project team members that are on that page. Shanda's email address is in that chat for you. But like I said, if you visit Get Involved Kingston, everything is there for you. So we'll just give that poll another moment before we close off tonight. And thank you again for taking the time to join us. All right, everyone, that is it for tonight. Thank you again. We appreciate your time and hope that you will visit Get Involved Kingston to complete that survey. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.